For a man whose life was defined so predominantly by a strong work ethic, as his youngest grandchild and thus the one who knew him in his later years, I must admit this truth, that when I think of Grandpa, I think of him asleep. From my earliest memories to my latest, I recall him sitting on Auntie Jerry's floor on New Year's Day, on a plastic chair near my dad's woodworking tools, on his living room armchair next to the television, in his car waiting to bring me home from Japanese school. And in each of these recollections, I see him napping, his head back as if looking toward the sky, and his mouth wide open. As a child, maybe even a high schooler, I'd see how long I could hold my finger in his open mouth before he'd wake up and notice. He never did. But Grandpa, as previously alluded, wasn't always sleeping. Quite the contrary, he was the kind of example of hard work, dedication, and achievement that in my generation I encounter rarely, if ever. Grandpa's father, Takejiro, emigrated to America in the late 1890s in one of the first groups of Japanese immigrants to arrive in Hawaii in the hope of finding plantation work. A few years later, in 1902, Grandpa's mother, Iwa, arrived in Hawaii already married to Takejiro at the age of 22. She arrived with roughly $16 in her possession. Iwa and Takejiro raised 4 children born in Hawaii: Keisuke, Grandpa's oldest brother, Haruko, his sister, Grandpa, and Mitsugi. A 5th sibling, Sato, lived her life in Japan on Takejiro's home island of Tsuoshima. Because Grandpa would not travel to Japan until later in his life, it was only toward the end of Sato's life that he had the pleasure of meeting her. Born on Leap Day in 1924, Grandpa technically celebrated only 22 birthdays. Despite this, he accomplished quite a lot in his years. Although born to Japanese-speaking parents who could not read or write English, Grandpa graduated from McKinley High School at a time when only 51% of Americans obtained a high school degree. Along with his primary education, Grandpa also attended Japanese school at Hawaii Chugakuen, where listing accomplishments, it should be noted his bad behavior successfully made his sensei cry. According to census records, by the age of 20, Grandpa was the highest contributor to his household income. Beginning as a carpenter's apprentice on residential construction projects, he worked by day and attended vocational school in the evenings, where he learned to read blueprints and study mechanical drawings. He worked his way up to the title of construction supervisor at Wahiawa Builders Construction Company. Though a quiet and humble man, he took well-deserved pride in the buildings he worked on, which included Tripler Hospital, the hangar at Hickam, the Hau'ula Fire Station, Wahiawa Medical Center, Wahiawa General Hospital and its extensions, Wahiawa Extended Care Facility, Pearl City Library, Campbell High School, and Church College of Laie. Although one might imagine a construction supervisor as a man in dusty jeans and a hard hat, Grandpa was quite the opposite. He was a snappy dresser, flashy even, with an extensive collection of rings and watches. Like Jackie O's iconic Halston pillbox hat, Grandpa had his own iconic accessories, namely his massive gold and jade ring, which he was still wearing when admitted to the hospital in January. Grandpa preferred his clothes tailor-made and was always conscious of his attire. Auntie Jerry remembers that when going out, she, Grandma, and my dad would have to wait in the car while Grandpa changed his outfits several times. In this way, my dad will never be rid of Grandpa's spirit. The, quote, waiting in the car for someone to pick an outfit curse followed my dad into fatherhood, where to this day he sits in the car threatening to drive away while I litter the bedroom floor with discarded outfit options. While Grandpa's aforementioned career accomplishments are impressive, as his grandchild, I consider the accomplishments of his personal and family life most significant. Grandpa met Grandma while riding a bus. At the time, Grandma was on her way to a dance social. While Grandpa's initial destination is unclear, he nonetheless ended up at the same event as Grandma, where he asked her to dance. It should be noted that back then, this gesture was probably viewed as romantic as opposed to creepy and stalker-like. While courting Grandma, Grandpa would often ask Auntie Lillian to cover Grandma's chores so he could take her out on the town, a favor he secured from Auntie Lillian in exchange for his gratitude and, of course, gifts of jewelry, perhaps better described as bribes. Grandpa was also a generous father. Both my dad and Auntie Jerry recall not a single occurrence on which Grandpa scolded or punished them. Grandma would attempt to use Grandpa as leverage, threatening that she would, quote, tell Dad whenever they misbehaved. Auntie Jerry says, quote, Harris and I would just laugh at ourselves, knowing full well he would never do anything to scold us. Now, while I can't vouch for Auntie Jerry's behavior, I'm quite certain that my dad's stunts warranted punishments, at least stern words, on occasion. Random acts of cruelty, such as locking Auntie Jerry in a dark closet with frantic live birds, have left psychological scarring to this day. But Grandpa never seemed to have it in him to dole out punishments. As Grandpa entered old age, his generosity never waned. His desire to assist is what I admired most. He was always looking for ways to help, fix things, clean up after people, pull weeds, or cut grass. Grandpa religiously came to sit by my dad's side as he did his woodwork and became a fixture at the shop. Grandpa's photo even appeared in some Japanese tourist magazines as a sort of mascot for my dad's business. On my last visit home, though I did not see Grandpa in his trusty seat beside my dad, upon visiting Grandma and Grandpa's house, I saw a box of wooden letters my dad had brought Grandpa to sand. It touched and inspired me to see how inextricable Grandpa's happiness was from his sense of usefulness and his ability to contribute. And it moved me that my dad recognized that and accommodated him as a loving son. I may not have been present to witness Grandpa and Grandma's rearing of my dad and auntie, but my experience as a daughter and a niece confirms that such people of character, humor, selflessness, and motivation must have come from a loving and successful household. What a successful household looks like, or how one builds one, is a mystery to me and probably most. But the love and safety I feel because of my parents and the look in Vinny's eyes when he sees his grandma are evidence enough that I'm a product of generations of doing something right. We owe the lives we enjoy to our parents and the generations before. All of the struggles, mistakes, and tragedies endured by our families are endured for us, and for that, I am a grateful recipient. A final memory. Grandpa had an odd obsession with flashlights. For some mysterious reason, he would always find the biggest flashlight to take with him whenever he got into a car. In recent months, Auntie Jerry began sleeping over at their house to watch over Grandma and Grandpa at night. Grandpa would always take at least one, sometimes more, flashlights with him to bed. After Auntie would put him in bed, he would insist on shining the flashlight down the hall so that she could see better, regardless of her protest that she didn't need any additional flashlight light. Auntie Jerry says, quote, more times than not, I would have to go back after he fell asleep to turn the flashlight off for him. For months, the outdoor light on the stairs to my apartment has been out, and evenings makes those stairs dangerous and difficult to navigate. In the last week, someone has finally replaced the light bulb. Coming home from work late after hearing of Grandpa's passing, I reached the bottom of the stairs and noted I could finally make the ascent without worrying about falling on my face or breaking an ankle. The stairs are now washed with light, even in the darkest of night, and I can see the bulb from my window. Grandpa's flashlight obsession was weird and oftentimes hilarious. But in a way, it's representative of something larger. His desire to be the one who lights a path for us, one that is safer and brighter because of him. I will look for Grandpa as I have all my life, on a plastic chair next to my dad's tools, cleaning up after a day of work, washing someone's car, or pulling someone's weeds. When I don't see him there, I will feel a loss, but I will nonetheless continue to see him elsewhere. When the LA Lakers lose a game, when I put on my gaudy gold watch and cocktail rings so similar to the ones he wore, when I drive by Waihawa General, a place he built that later cared for him, and when I return home at night and can ascend the stairs without concern. Rest in peace, Grandpa, and I promise not to put a finger in your mouth if you decide to rest with your mouth wide open.